Hello, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to our August strategy session. I want to make sure you can hear me okay. There's a lot of background noise where I'm at. I'm actually at the convention. Are you all able to hear me okay? Okay, great. Welcome. Very excited to be here. I am going to go ahead and jump into our session so that we can make the most of our time. We have a really important presentation today, and I want to give some updates on what I've observed over the last 3 days here at the convention. Daughter, if you don't mind texting me a copy of the agenda so that I don't get ahead of myself or miss anything.
Will do.
Thank you.
Isn't the energy super exciting there at the convention?
It is. I see you, Sister Vanessa. It is. It is. And I actually just finished the interview. I'll just jump into some updates on what's happening at the convention. If anyone is here, please text me. I would love to see you before you leave town. I know there's at least several of our local leaders that are here in town. And so I have to be careful because I'm speaking with my first repair voice, and we are a non-for-profit, and we don't endorse candidates. So I want to be sure that this doesn't come across as an endorsement. But we do, however, have potential crisis in this nation with the political culture that we're in. And I could say, based on what I have observed, that I have never felt more hope, but I also want to be very honest with the reparations movement. I haven't heard the reparations word in any remarks. No one's remarks have even gotten close to reparative justice, no variation of reparations at all. But one thing that I know about being an experienced elected official is that much of our work, the high level sort of transformational, intergenerational work is multi-term work that it takes priming to get to a major new legislation. And I'm not offering this as an excuse, but I am offering it as what I've had to acknowledge and settle with, to be patient and not angry and be hopeful. And so I'm going to hold on to hope. That's the energy that I'm going to choose, is hope and belief that we are making our way there. I know for a fact that there is one outcome of this race that would not get us there. I know that for a fact. We all know that for a fact. So I am holding on to hope because it is a process, and we do have elected leaders that have heard the demands for reparations, understand the case for reparations based on who they have represented and who they are and their life experiences. And so I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm going to keep showing up. And everywhere I go, I'm going to keep mentioning all of you and your cities and what we're doing and what we expect Congress and our national leaders, and particularly our president, to do by executive order. So I will keep doing that. And I've been able to lift up all the work that we do together over the last few days. And I'll continue to do that. I'll be at the last day today. And if anybody wants to give me any special directions, or any special inspiration, please do reach out to me directly by text. I am paying attention to my phone, just coming off of a couple of weeks of a summer break. So I wanted to be honest and let you know that reparations has not come up. We really miss the presence of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. not being at the convention. Her leadership is so unique. And after watching all of the speakers, I appreciate her even more so than I did while she was among us. And I didn't think that was possible. And so we will continue. There are others that are working on this nationally. I'm not working on the national case for reparations as much as many other leaders that are present today. And so if you have an initiative that is centered around HR 40, the demand for HR 40, or the effort for executive order, please put that in the chat so that our local leaders know who you are and know how to engage in your initiatives. There was a wonderful march that happened, and I think I just saw Jamoke jump on. So I would love, Jamoke, if you have an opportunity to share. I saw your picture in the video. So Jamoke, if you have a moment to just share the outcomes of the march that was led by EAT, if I'm not mistaken, that would be great. And then we'll jump into the rest of our agenda. Jamoke, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in a car. So actually, there's been several reparations actions here in Chicago during the DNC. There was a town hall meeting that was attended, I guess, a couple hundred people at the Conrad Worrell track and field in honor of Dr. Conrad Worrell. The Conrad Worrell Reparations Commission put that on. And there was a lot of speakers from around the Midwest and representing different reparations organizations locally in Chicago as well. And then there was and then the city provided space for community organizations to speak on their issue near the United Center. So the local chapter of Chicago chapter of Bacopa took advantage of that, and myself and the local leadership of the Chicago chapter spoke at that event. And we got a lot of press. There was a lot of press out at that event on Tuesday. And then Wednesday was the march that you referred to, EAT. And they had orange t-shirts for everybody. So it was really a strong presence. Grassroots community organizers in the community was very involved, the local community, learning about Chicago, the South Side, East Side, West Side. And but anyway, so that was on the West Side, I believe, that march. And there was several rallies. Cam spoke, I spoke, Dr. Amara, Black Lives, and several other local grassroots community organizers spoke. There was actually 3 rallies. They had a rally at the beginning point, and a rally at the midpoint, and a rally at the end point. I wasn't able to catch the rally at the end point. And then there was the reparation strategy meeting that was led by Cam Howard at the DuSable Museum, who were coming up with ideas of where we move forward after the DNC convention is over. What are the next steps? And we had a lively discussion at that as well. So a little update for some of the Chicago reparations actions. And understand today Cornel West is speaking at a reparations event at 3:30, which we'll be at as well.
Thank you, Jamoke. And if we can get any reports, especially from the Reparations United strategy session at some point, because there were some strategy, marching orders, some thought around how we continue to advance the case for reparations. I imagine even more so HR 40 and executive order for HR 40. If you could.
Yeah, I'm here in the car with Cam right now.
Oh. Could you pass the phone to Cam real quick?
Sure.
Okay.
Greetings, everyone. Yeah, Jamoke. Hey, Robin.
Hey, Cam. My request is if you will be reporting back the strategy that came out of your strategy session, and if we can, should we go to Reparations United, or will you share it in one of your future updates here at the strategy session?
Thank you for that question. So the purpose of the strategy session was to develop actual actions against what we call the four targets. Initially, prior to Biden's poor debate performance, we had primarily two targets that we were messaging to our goal of executive order to establish Reparations Commission to, and that was the president and the Black electorate. However, when things changed as they are now, we had to shift targets, and we added additional targets. So we wanted to identify those targets, which are President Biden still is the main target, the CBC is a target, the Big Eight civil rights organizations who has the ear to Biden, who was asked to craft documents to the president in regards to what they thought he should be focused on his last 5 months in office. So far, we haven't heard them speak on the issue of reparations. Robin stated many of them are here. In fact, all of them are here, and that issue has not been brought up. So the Big Eight civil rights organizations, we identified them who meet regularly with the president, who has met regularly with the president throughout his 4 terms. And then Kamala Harris is the 4th target. And so we wanted to have particular actions. We wanted to have at least 3 actions come out of our strategy session for each of the 4 targets. What would we do? And that was like Moke said, it was really lively discussion around that. We wanted to actually aggregate those ideas and then come back and vote on the top 3, because we started late and we pretty much ran out of time. So what we've done is we created a forum where people, once we had a scribe, once the scribe puts everything together in a neat form, we'll send that out to everybody who registered with the form. And with that, we'll come back and have an ability for everybody to vote on the top 3, and then we'll disseminate those to the movement. And the goal is that once the movement get these, you can, no matter where you at, you can either as an individual or as an organization, local, national, or a state organization, take one of these actions and implement it. Again, the goal is now, initial goal with Earn a Black Vote was to get an executive order established before the election. That's not going to happen. But the time frame after the election and pre-inauguration is really our goal to get that executive order established by that time. And so the actions that have came out of the strategy session is to work to get to achieve that goal. Thank you. If I can say one last thing, we're en route to, I'm en route. We understand that James Clyburn and others will be at a meeting at the National Association of Realtors. And so I'm headed there now to try to get a brief 2-3 minute conversation with him, maybe even 30 seconds, just to put the acts out there or the demand out there that Biden still do this before he leaves office. Sound?
You're on mute, Robin.
Okay, it wasn't just us.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Is Linda here so that we can have Redress Network updates?
I don't see Linda on today.
I think she's on
Perfect.
leave.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then we have Virginie. Do you have any updates before you get into your presentation?
No updates today. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And so we're going to move on to our regional reports. And we don't have our reports from the Midwest, the West, and the East today, unless someone is here prepared to report briefly. But we do have Brother Jamoke here from the South region. Jamoke, if you could give us your regional report.
Yeah, actually not much of a report for the South region, unfortunately. We'll just report out that they're working with a group in Decatur, Georgia, Beacon Hill. They had a very good town hall meeting, talking to the community residents in Decatur around how they're moving towards reparations there. One of the main issues, similar to Evanston, there is the issue of gentrification, issue of redlining, and how the Black neighborhood was pushed out and by the city, and it's all well documented. So we're just working on collecting the stories from the elders, and they had a very good meeting. And that's about all I have to report out on the South region, unfortunately, at this time. Yeah, I think you're mute again.
Thank you, Jamoke.
Thank you.
Bobby, yes, Bobby, great to
Hi.
see you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Bobby Alexander here from Denver, Colorado. I just wanted to report out, this happened in July, but I haven't been here in a while. Senate Bill 24-53. It is a study about the injustices that have happened to people in Colorado, was passed and signed by the governor in July. It is a community funded initiative. So they had to raise 785,000 by July 1st, which was indeed raised. I think the entire study will cost about 1.4 or 1.6 million. So that was a major success here in Colorado, and I just wanted to make sure that we shared that. Also, I am on the Denver Black Reparations Council, and we're having our first annual summit, which is pretty much like a panel discussion that will happen in September. So that's all I've got.
Awesome, Bobby. If you could get us a flyer and we'll share it with your region broadly.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And generally, we don't. Let's go ahead and just have, I don't know if these are questions or remarks regarding regional updates, but that's what this time is for. So Aziza, Kathleen, and then Prophet in that order.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Robin, for your leadership. Thank you, Kim and Jamoke, for all the backbone and that stuff at the DNC in Boston. Our task force just put out a search for a reparations task force manager. So we're really excited about that. They also put out mini grants to community. So probably 15 to 20 research grants to individuals and organizations to do small research projects, and also about 10 to 15 community engagement grants, small grants to organizations and individuals that wanted to do the same work. And that's it for Boston.
Thank you, Aziza. Kathleen?
Yes, I just want to say that the state of Massachusetts bills, the House bill and the Senate bill, have been moved to study, which I guess means that they have been moved there to die. So that's what's happening in terms of the state bills for reparations in Massachusetts. I also want to mention that that Nkichi organized reparations town hall that happened a couple of weeks ago, and maybe she can speak more to that. I think it was quite a successful gathering of folks. Also, I'm working with a member of the California Reparations who is planning a 40-day walk from Long Beach to San Francisco. So I'm working with her on organizing that. That is being planned for approximately June of 2025. So stay tuned for updates about that as the planning continues. And Kichi, if you're willing to talk about the reparations town hall gathering on Martha's Vineyards, that would be great.
That was amazing. Thank you, Nkichi.
Mm-hmm.
Do I go next, or is it someone else?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, I was only stepping in because Mary Dean is on and she did give a report for Midwest. Do we not give it here or that goes to something else? And then I also put something in private chat, direct message to a couple people about a meeting we're having, but we did have a report out for that.
Please do. Bailey actually just texted me that there was a report. So if you do, that would be great.
Go ahead, Mary. And then I put something in the chat because we need some resources for a meeting we're having this evening. So
just a brief update from Wichita. We have formed a coalition, Wichita Coalition for, we're trying to figure out a word, oversight or whatever, whenever the commission is created. We have been doing listening sessions all over the city. We're having a meeting tonight with the United Methodist, College Hill United Methodist Church, because of the board members, they want to know how they can support the reparations movement here in Wichita. So we're having that meeting tonight. And we also pulled the ordinance that was submitted in February to make it stronger, to be resubmitted to the mayor and city council September or sometime in October. And that's it for Wichita. Thank you.
just that if anyone here can put something in the private chat or whatever of resources for allies, it would be great for this group that we're going to tonight.
Thank you. I just saw your direct message. I will put some contacts in the chat. Sister Nikichi, and if you could share any information about your March next year too.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm sorry from the phone. I was not able to get off of mute, so I joined from my computer. Thank you, Kathleen, for calling on me for that. First, I just want to give a very brief update from Washington, D.C. In the East. The Reparations Task Force bill hopefully will be reintroduced with all of the suggestions that the committee, our committee, Reparations Committee, has made. DC is very pivotal because of our colonial status. All of our bills have to go through Congress. So there's going to be a lot of attention to that when that does happen. Yes, we had a very, very extremely successful reparations town hall in Martha's Vineyard the end of July and the beginning of August. I'm in the process right now of editing the tape from that, and we'll make sure all of that is given to you, Robin, so that you can get it to the folk on this call. Kathleen from this call here was present. Of course, Aziza was present. I'm not sure who all else is on here, but Judge Margaret Burnham and Christy from Tulsa, Vanessa Hall, Harper, the Letts, and all. There were Robin Prouty, my dear sister from Brown Grove. A lot of folk were there and involved, and it was phenomenal. And then the last thing is on May 16th and 17th of 2025, there's going to be a national reparations rally in Washington, D.C. I'm going to put in the chat the information that tells more about it and how you can be involved with it. But basically, enter those dates on your calendar, and anybody who's not able to come to DC, similar to the international sphere, there'll be lots of side events going on across the country. And actually, speaking of side events, the last thing is anyone coming to DC for the Congressional Black Caucus annual legislative weekend that's in September. I'm having a CBC side event soiree at my home. There'll be music, DJ, food, conversation, networking, national and local reparations leaders, speakers, and the like. So, you're welcome to come, and I can put that information in the chat as well. Robin, all the great work that you're doing, back to you.
Thank you. And it looks like we have one last remark from Janae.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to update you on Kansas City, Missouri. So the KC Reparations Coalition, we are still organizing with our faith-based faith-based initiative. We're trying to identify a leader that really has the time to devote to that initiative. So that's where we are with that. There are a couple of commissioners on the line, so I'm not sure if they would want to share about what's going on with the commission, but I will just give a little bit and they can add on if they like. As you all know, they've been funded $360,000 out of the city's 2024-2025 budget. And so right now they have an RFI out and they're getting researchers to apply for that. And Terry Barnes, who's the chair of the commission, said that they are hoping that they will have a list of researchers to vet by the end of this month. And that we had a Black audit project done here by Professor Hansford and African American Redress and students from Howard and Columbia University. And they did an excellent job with that. So we are definitely making sure that that gets utilized with the proposals that the commission will be working on. So I'm not sure if Brother Will Bowles or Sister Dennis Hartsfield had anything to add to the commission's activity. Okay, Sister Dennis said, I'm good, so I think I'm good.
Thank you. And we're going to move on to our presentation. We all know Virginia. One of our partners here has been hosting alongside First Repair, Redress Network, and now Reparations United for the last couple of years, I guess it's been. And so I am going to save our time. And if you don't know Virginia, definitely read her bio. But she is joining us along with her colleague, Emma. And I am going to mute myself. First, I want to make sure that you have access to host if you need to screen share or anything along those lines. Are you all set for that?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So Emma, I think you can go ahead and screen share. Thank you, Robin. Thanks for opening this space. We're really happy to be here. My name is Virginie Ladish. I'm a senior expert at ICTJ, and just want to let Emma introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Merritt-Cuneo, and I'm a programs expert at ICTJ.
Great. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about our work globally. And on the next slide, you can see just a brief glimpse of where we work as ICTJ. This is the organization that we both represent. We were established in 2001 by two South Africans who were involved in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and a researcher looking also at these new approaches to dealing with legacies of systemic and massive human rights violations. Since being founded in 2001, we've worked in over 50 countries. Most are on this map, a few are missing. But what we do very briefly, and you can see there's more information on our website, is we really accompany and help societies that are embarking on a path towards a more just, equitable, and peaceful future by taking collective action to address legacies of massive human rights violations. And very briefly, when we use the term transitional justice, we're referring to the different approaches that have been used to address these legacies, including truth-seeking, reparations efforts, institutional reform, and various forms of accountability, and measures to prevent also the recurrence of these harms. So just a few examples of the type of work that we do. For example, we've been working in the Gambia since 2018 to accompany government leaders and civil society members and victim leaders who are leading efforts to address the legacies of harm from the dictatorship of Yahya Jammeh. And that includes by establishing a truth commission, a reparations program, and also special prosecutions. So our role there, we have an office in the Gambia, has been to provide technical support and accompaniment to the government officials, helping them also facilitate exchanges with other contexts, and then supporting victims in civil society and acting as a bridge between those two groups. You can see also on the map, we do a lot of work in the Americas, including Canada, where there we accompanied the truth-seeking process, looking at the legacy of Indian residential boarding schools, and really worked with them to think about how to open spaces for more young people to be involved in these processes. And over the past few years, Emma and I have been, back to the US, really looking at focusing transitional justice and supporting transitional justice efforts here in the US, using the global lens to help us look at our home context in a new way and to try new approaches to advance the goals of justice and repair. And we're also taking the insights from our work here in the US to look back at some of the assumptions and approaches that have been used globally and to question them and see where do we need to adjust? What can we learn from the US that can help us better address these systemic legacies of harm? Some might say, each context is so different, working across the globe, what really can, someone in Canada learn from someone in Uganda? And it's true that one of the main points of our work is focusing on being really sensitive and adapted to the context. But we've also found that if you zoom out, the farther you zoom out, you start to see certain trends and challenges that emerge, common needs and demands that cut across culture and context. For example, the very human need for acknowledgement and recognition. So today, in our brief time together, we're going to share with you a few reflections that come from that process of looking at the US, what questions arise from our work here, then zooming out globally to see what insights can we get, what different ways of framing can we get from some of the global experiences, and then taking those back to the US and see how it might help us imagine or adapt the approach going on today. So we'll look at that, and then also want to highlight some of the ways in which the work in the US is, as I said, helping us with our global work and pushing that global conversation on reckoning in new directions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Emma.
Virginie. And I wanted to first say, sort of globally, the field of transitional justice has often been criticized at times for being an elite-led neo-colonial approach, which can sometimes lead to less transformative change. And typically, we see transitional justice approaches focusing more at the national level, and a lack of political will is often one of the major challenges it tends to face. And in contexts where transitional justice processes are either non-existent or they're stalled because of a lack of political will, we see a lot of grassroots efforts globally advocating and pressuring the government to implement transitional justice to respond to victims' demands. And so you can see for example, on the screen in Uganda, there's an absence of a transition and lack of political will to address violations that were committed during the decades-long conflict. But in that absence, women survivor groups like Women's Advocacy Network and Watikigen that are pictured on the slide have not only been advocating for the government to respond to survivors' demands, but they're also finding really unique and alternative ways at the local level to make existing government development programs like the national plan envisioned in Uganda Vision 2040 to make it more victim sensitive and therefore more accessible for survivors and their children to benefit from. And so when we see this, these approaches globally, it's less common for the local government with these efforts to address victims' needs to specifically call these efforts or acknowledge them as reparation. And so what Virginie and I have observed at the US approach is that it's been really unique to see in its way of pursuing repair through a hyper-local level approach, and also having the multitude of approaches happening at once across the country. In Australia, the state of Victoria has some similarities in that there's a state level truth commission, but we've yet to see it lead to other states also taking on similar efforts or national level reckoning of the past. And so from our vantage point, this approach in the US is not only inspiring, but it will provide a lot of insights and ideas for other contexts where national level efforts are stalled or non-existent. And so now I'd like to zoom back a little bit and share some of the reflections and observations that Virginie and I will talk about with you today. But first, I'd like to put a little context. So we want to speak about what observations we see that's relevant when it comes to reckoning with past harms in consolidated democracies. And to put a little context around why pursuing transitional justice work in this context could be considered a challenge is that these elements of truth-seeking, reparation, accountability, reform are typically implemented after the end of a dictatorship and a transition to democracy is initiated, or at the end of a civil war as part of peace-building efforts. And so a challenge that's emerging with transitional justice being pursued in established democracies when seeking to reckon with the past is that there's no transition or moment that prompts the recreation or reimagining of social and political institutions. And those institutions are well established and deeply entrenched, often in the same systems that perpetrated the initial abuse. And so drawing on our work from the US and globally accompanying reparations and truth-seeking efforts, there's 3 points that we want to highlight today that we think deserve a little bit more attention in this regard. And the first is recognizing the challenges of addressing systemic harm in a system of ongoing harm. The second is being intentional in creating a process that is reparative in and of itself. And the final point for today is how to embed government accountability in this work. And so we'll touch briefly on these 3 points, and I'll turn it over to Virginie. Virginie, you muted.
Thank you. But the first point that we want to talk about is just really just recognizing the particular challenges that come from seeking to advance truth, repair, and reform in a context like the United States. Historically, we've seen, transitional justice efforts have struggled to actually address deeply entrenched systemic harm. Next slide, please. So there's been a range of times in which truth commissions or reparations efforts are put into place. Sometimes it's after a massacre or a civil war or a period of authoritarian regime. But in a context like South Africa, the United States, or Canada, in addition to immediate violations, such as torture, kidnappings, or killings, there's also the larger system of harm. And here I have this quote from Professor Mamdani and a political cartoon from South Africa that speaks a little bit to a case that maybe some of you have heard of. I think South Africa and its Truth Commission is one of the most known truth commissions that's often held up as an example. And it was extremely innovative in the way that it held public hearings. It was the first truth commission to publicize them, make them accessible to the broader public via television, radio, newspapers. And in that extent, it was really important in, as one researcher noted, Michael Ignatieff, limiting the realm of permissible lies, or limiting the lies that a society tells itself about its past. But one challenge that I think South Africa has been criticized for is not being able to really sufficiently name and then recommend how to undo the system of apartheid itself, the structures that created such an unequal society. And you can see here, in a sense, with the cartoon, looking into the belly of the beast to see what were the violations, the kidnapping, the torture that occurred. But it was much harder for the commission to think about the whole beast itself. And that's a similar context that we face in the United States. Next slide. So thinking about how do we move past the specific isolated violations to actually look at the overall system. And I think just, again, noting how hard it is to name and undo those systems and structures of oppression. And I think a context like the US, where, as Emma noted, there's not this moment of transition, there's not a major shift in power as we had in South Africa. There's, I think, we don't have answers to this, but I just, from having accompanied different, members working to push for this, I think it's important to at least acknowledge how hard this is, and then also identify what are the unique challenges that come from working within a system that continues to exclude and continues to cause harm because of the ways in which structural racism and discrimination are baked into its very fabric. So the first point is to recognize that challenge. The next is to think about, once that's recognized, to be aware of the ways this system creates obstacles or perpetuates exclusion. And then thinking about, how do we overcome them? So here it's important to consider, what are those aspects of our institutions that intentionally or even unintentionally, so some of the protections that we have in place to protect our democracy may actually, in some situations, be an impediment to doing the type of work that reparations commissions or task forces need to do. So one example is in Washtenaw County. The Advisory Council on Reparations was set up explicitly to be exempt from the Open Meetings Act, because the Open Meetings Act in that county does not allow virtual participation. And there, the Chief Equity Officer, Elise Asbury Payne, who kind of really was the motor behind setting up the ACR, recognized that, allowing virtual participation would make the process more democratic, more inclusive, and so decided to make sure that it had the possibility to do so. Next slide. So that's one thing, one way to look at what are the policies and practices that are in place that can prevent the type of work that we're all trying to do. And others to also be aware of the cultural norms that are not policies per se, but sort of terms and what those terms are associated with. So here I want to give an example from Alaska, the First Alaskan Truth Tribunal, where they're leading an effort, it's a civil society-led effort to look at the different institutions of government that have created harm against the First Alaskan peoples and finding ways to remedy those. And so as they launched this process, they decided to change the terminology that's often associated with a legal system more linked to oppression than justice, and reclaim the terms of this process to be more in tune with the objectives of what they're trying to achieve. So they use the term, instead of witness or testimony giver, they use the word truth providers. Then you can see a few other terms here. They have the story guardians, who are the ones who are listening. Maybe you would call it the scribe, but listening and recording the stories and then making sure to share them with others so that they're not lost and they're part of the oral history as well as the written record. And I wanted to also draw your attention to the last term, the accountability partners. So they've decided to invite in the institutions that are responsible for some of the harms, for example, the Hunting and Fishing Licensing Bureau, to invite them in to this process as accountability partners, where they come in after signing a contract saying that they're there to, first that they acknowledge harm was done, and they're coming to this truth tribunal to listen and acknowledge and reflect, not speak, but to hear what has to be said and then reflect and then come back later with some proposals. So shifting the power dynamics as well, so that those who often are in the positions of power are in a position of hearing, listening, and after some time and reflection, responding. Next slide. So in light of these challenges that, we find are particular to contexts like the United States, same as for Canada, Australia, or European contexts, we want to just how challenging it is to move an institution, a bureaucracy. It's important to frame, in our view, reparations as an iterative, long-term process, not an end. We've seen globally, taking the long view, some of the most impactful reparations programs have been ones that have expanded and have had multiple phases as more information becomes available or as political will opens and shifts. So here, one example is in Chile. Over the span of 21 years, the government enacted a series of reparations programs to meet, to consider and take to provide benefits to different groups of victims. The first, initially after the transition away from dictatorship of Pinochet, all that there was political space to tackle was those who had been disappeared or killed. But then as more time passed and more information became available and political will opened up, to also look at those who survived and then also former political prisoners and those who had been dismissed for their employment. So I think I just want to highlight this case as a reminder to, take the long view, try and push for as much as is possible in the moment in a way that then also leaves the door open for future efforts. So now I want to turn briefly to the second point that we want to highlight today, which is around thinking about how do we create opportunities for the process to be reparative in itself. As I just mentioned, if we take the long view and really frame reparations as a long-term journey, especially in a context like the US where the harm was committed over generations, it's going to take a while to get there. And also, unfortunately, the final outcome is often subject to political will for legislation to be passed, for money to be allocated, for benefits to be dispersed. And while there's a lot that can be done, and those leading this work can really try and make the best efforts to craft a really positive and strong recommendation for reparations, the final outcome is largely out of their hands. So, what we've seen can be helpful is thinking about how do we create opportunities for repair along the way, not waiting just for the end benefit, but through the process itself. What are those moments or those ways to create a reparatory process for those who've been impacted? So I just want to share a few ideas from truth-seeking work globally, in particular, the ways in which truth commissions have opened up spaces in their public engagement and public hearings, and created space for them to be. I'm sorry, actually, I skipped the point. So first, we want to talk about how to make it reparative for both those who are leading the process, and then the second point was which I was about to go to, for those involved in the process. So for those leading the process, I want to call attention to the term we've coined of the resource mandate disconnect. What I mean by that is disconnect, especially looking at globally how these processes are handled, between the burden of the mandate, so designing a reparations plan for centuries of harm, and then the amount of resources allocated to that. Globally, the US is an outlier in tasking this type of work to unpaid volunteers. In other countries, the processes that we've worked with and accompanied, they're always led by full-time paid staff, and it's often quite a prestigious position as well. So if you go to the next slide, we see that this is a quote from one of the public sessions in San Francisco, where one of the citizens was just commenting that, for the reasons stated here, very problematic that those leading this work aren't paid, and also further that the lack of funding from government could indicate a lack of commitment to really follow through on this. So thinking about, it's important to think about what are those rules. I mean, we know there are certain rules of local government that make it to try and protect impartiality, where you can't be paid if you are one on the task force or committee. But we wonder, are there other ways to create or establish these task forces to circumvent those rules, so that those who are leading the work can be paid? And we saw something similar happen in Vermont, where they've created a government-supported but independent Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where the 3 commissioners are paid full-time salaries. And they have a small staff. They'll still say their mandate is huge, it's not sufficient, but it's maybe one step in the right direction, something to consider. But beyond the financial process, next slide, it's also important to look holistically at the conditions of this work and how to ensure the well-being of those leading it. And thinking back again to South Africa and how entrenched the systems of harm were there, and similarly in the United States, I include here a quote from Nomfundo Mugapi, a South African psychologist, who's really pushed for greater attention to be paid to those who are leading this work, both in terms of individuals and institution, and to recognize the woundedness that we all carry as a result of living within these systems that continue to oppress and create harm. And so she draws attention to the fact that we don't need just to support people with technical skills, but also focus on personal and interpersonal well-being, and make time for trust building, time to reflect, and to plan this work together under good conditions, to also be then prepared for when the forces of these institutions in the status quo really pushed back against those leading this work to make sure that they're not further drained by this process. And now to the next point, it's thinking again to the intended beneficiaries, so those who will be receiving reparations. Like I said, since it's a long-term process, and the end is often up to political will, as we see right now in California, right? There's a series of legislative packages waiting to be passed for reparations to be made a reality. But along the way, there are many different ways to create moments of reparative justice. And so here I want to highlight just one approach, perhaps for your consideration, that draws from the public engagement of truth commissions and how they open space for those who've been impacted by violations. So globally, we've really heard from those that have participated in public hearings or listening sessions led by truth commissions. They've noted how important and helpful it's been to have a government or an official body publicly hear, recognize with dignity and respect their experiences which were often pushed aside, negated, or denied. And they've noted that this in itself is a significant step in the reparations process. And here you can see a few examples from Canada, their Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where they took really extra steps to think about how to make the process itself really positive for the survivors. And you can see in the photo, the man in the green vest and the woman next to him, they were health supports. And so the Truth Commission really invested a lot of thought into what type of support they would provide, both for the staff leading the commission, as well as those who would come to share their stories, and made sure to provide culturally sensitive forms of health support. So both Western trained psychologists as well as traditional healers. Next slide. And we see that this idea of thinking about how the public listening sessions can already provide some sense of repair has already been adopted within the United States, for example, with this quote from California. So I'll leave it at that just in terms of, again, thinking about how to be intentional in the process to create spaces for repair, and now turn it over back to Emma for the last point.
Thanks, Virginie. And for our last point, I just want to touch on two areas and practices that we see globally as ways to tie government accountability to the process. And so the first is that we see globally a lot of legislation that establishes these truth, transitional justice measures, provides the legislation how and when the government should respond. And of course, politicians can and will find ways to circumvent their responsibilities, but this at least puts something on paper that civil society can advocate around and hold the government accountable. And in the Gambia, on the right-hand side of the screen of this slide, you see a screenshot from the legislation that established the Truth Commission that outlines the government's obligations. And it required the government respond within 6 months with an implementation plan once the final report and recommendations were issued. And in reality, the government did respond in 6 months, but it was only identifying which recommendations it accepted. And it wasn't until a year later that a full implementation plan was actually issued by the government. And so having this in writing, it made it clear that that first step taken by the government was lacking and that more was needed. And the second element that we see a lot globally is also the building in a plan for follow-up and monitoring. That sounds like, as we heard, I think from Kansas City was talking about oversight that the coalition was going to take on. And globally, we see the monitoring and the follow-up happening in several different ways, but this is essentially laying out in the legislation what are the next steps in the process for shepherding through, be that through an existing institution or one that still needs to be set up. And on the left-hand side of your screen here, you can see a screenshot from the National Human Rights Commission in the Gambia that has sort of a monitoring matrix to check on the government's process of implementing the recommendations in the Truth Commission's final report. In the US, we do see this happening where task forces don't necessarily sunset immediately. And that's the case, I believe, in San Francisco, where the task force stayed on about 6 extra months after its final report to engage in public engagement and also follow up with some city departments that that were relevant to their final report and recommendations. And so I guess from this final report, the question we'd like to pose is what might follow-up measures look like in the US context, and how can legislation include language and support for follow-up and also tie the government to action? And to sum up our time here is just to say that there's no answer to a lot of the challenges being faced, and there's no singular approach to reckoning with legacies of systemic harm. And sharing ideas, practices across contexts can help us problem solve and find ways to make this work more sustainable and impactful. And so we hope that some of the insights that we shared today from international examples provide at least a source of inspiration to look further. So I'll turn over to Virginie for anything else.
Thank you, Emma. Yeah, we just wanted to end it there with these questions that I know time is so short, but we'd love to get your thoughts or, questions to consider further around how, what it means to deal with advancing reparations in these established democracies. How have you found ways to make the process itself more reparative? And what kind of safeguards have you seen to be effective to ensure follow-up? So thank you so much. We're happy to take any questions or comments.
Could you please see the questions in the chat?
Let's see. Oh, no, thank you. I will look at the questions in the chat. Yes. Joan, maybe do you want to summarize your question and ask it unmuted, or?
Yeah, sure. I have no problem with it. To your point about the fact that a lot of these injustices are ongoing, it creates a liability interest for the government in question. This is something I'm living in real time. So because there's a liability interest and the city is stocked full with an entire law department and various other outside counsel, so forth and so on, the game that they're playing is, because they do have measures and ways that they can address this. In fact, there was recently a newspaper article that just came out only a few days ago that the city basically admitted the very things that I'm accusing them of, that they're doing right now. But when it comes to accountability, they don't want that. So that means they write back to me when I even ask questions that pertain to my own property, because a lot of this has to do with property rights, discriminatory issues with property rights. And by the way, in case y'all don't know, I am a descendant of the civil rights movement, where my father was recognized by the same municipality who created harm to him before I was born, and they're still creating harm to me every single day that I live. But then they say attorney-client privilege. I'm not even in court with these people right now. Chances are I do need to be in court with them. There may be a statute of limitations at some point. I desperately need a lawyer because I understand the long-term approach. But the reality is that my life is miserable every day because of this. And I'm desperately seeking counsel because at the end of the day, there's not going to be political will when they realize it's going to cost us money to fix this because we're still doing it. So I could live and die just the same as my father is now deceased. And they will never have political will in my lifetime unless something forces them to have the political will, which means that there's a legal action or a court forces them, or there's some public outcry, which doesn't exist because where I live is in the South, where, I mean, a lot of people are complacent where I live. I live in New Orleans. So there's a whole sense of complacency because people have been beaten down for so long. I am not complacent because I am the daughter of a civil rights activist and I wasn't born and raised in New Orleans, but these are the conditions that are here. So there's no local support. And I have a government that basically said, yeah, we did it and we're going to keep doing it. And we dare you to go to court. You have to take us to court. We know darn well you don't have the money. You don't have the power. You don't have the lawyers. You don't have the community support because we put you in that position purposefully. So we want you to do what we know that you can't do to force us to stop it. We dare you to force us to stop it because you can't, because you are powerless. And we admit that we did it and we're going to keep on doing it. while I'm sitting up here suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. As you say, it's the forces, the power dynamics are not just and stacked against. I think, you raise many different challenging questions, and as you say, the political will won't necessarily come on its own, and so it's about trying to find other ways, especially through collective action. I don't know the details, but thank you for making that comment. And
Well, I'm willing to offer the details to you guys because I'm desperately looking for help. So the thing is that that's why I'm in this space, because there needs to be collective action, whether it's this collective or some other collective or you guys or some outside legal something, but there has to be a resource somewhere.
right. Yeah, maybe you can message us up after to see about the details, whether we or First Repair can help connect you in some way. So
right, I'm trying with
Joan.
First Repair, but unfortunately I've been referred to people who are the lawyers that I've been referred to are people that are these high ranking places that are going to charge a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So I probably need a pro bono lawyer. So that's all of these different elements, because
Right.
I can't afford a lawyer. If I could, I would be able to get somebody if I had the money. That would not be the problem. It would not present the problem that it's presenting. And so I did try to reach out to you guys, and I don't know, probably a year ago, and the email bounced back because I think y'all weren't taking cases or something.
Okay. Yeah, so we're not lawyers, unfortunately, so we don't represent people, so we wouldn't be able to help you.
I understand that, but I mean, once again, you guys need to have the resources, because a movement like this, without the resources that it needs, especially if they're compelling, you need legal resources, because we're going to create a brick wall. And the brick wall is, we know that you don't have the legal resources that we have, then everything is moot.
Right. Thank you, Joan. Yes, I'm sorry. In the interest of time, I'm going to
just for the record,
go on to profit.
Just for the record, even with the reparations in Evanston, what is it facing right now? A legal challenge. So without the legal lawyers in place, it doesn't matter, because you can make all the effort and be successful, but then they're going to create a legal challenge. And if you don't have the lawyers, then everything you did goes to naught.
Yeah.
So even in that instance, we need the legal counsel.
Yeah, let me jump in. Joan, I appreciate your passion. Virginie, Emma, were you done with your presentation?
Yes, we're done. We were just taking any questions or comments. I know our time is almost up, but yes.
Yeah, okay. Time is up. I see that Prophet is that an old hand or a new hand?
Oh, it's brand new. It's been down a long time. But it's new. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, great.
I mean, if we're done with no, that's fine. I can, if you don't have time, it's fine. I just had a comment.
Okay, if you could, I'd love to hear your comment, and then I'm going to close out the meeting.
Okay, so I just wanted to share, actually I was trying to put it in the chat, but I can't seem to get to the chat well, but I just want to say that you said, what are we doing? And so what I choose to do around healing trauma, but I sent something to, let me just put it to everyone and I can cut this whole thing short. So on the 21st of September, we'll be offering a something at the Summit of the Future. So I do believe that there are answers. I do believe that there's a way forward, and I don't see it so hopeless, because I do personally believe that it's around healing ourselves. And also, but anyway, I put something in the chat. If anybody wants to reach out, they can. I know we're out of time, but I believe that I believe not only is there hope, I know that there are ways to manage not having the political will. And so if you want to give me an email, send me an email, then we can talk.
Thank you so much. And I stepped away for a moment, so I may be kind of disconnected from what's happened. I heard Joan expression passionately her disappointment. Adjoa, I see Attorney Maynard on the call. If you could put in the chat the best way to engage with the group of movement lawyers. I asked for that introduction to be made to Joan, and maybe that didn't happen. Our staff has been really busy. I think that would be a good call for Joan. Other than that, I would like to thank you all for your patience with me today while I've been incredibly distracted. Please do engage with your regional strategy sessions and report back there in more detail. And we look forward to our meeting next month.
I just
you.
want to mention something right away to Emma